I think in general, to an interview, an Oxbridge interview, there are a couple of different components. So one is obviously your personal statement. So what have you written in there, right? And that's going to be the hook for preparing an interview for you. And then I guess the second part is the subject itself. So, whether you match the minimum kind of requirements for the subject, whether you're actually interested in the subject, and whether you understand the basics of that subject. And then the third layer on top of that is the individual interviewer. So, what are they interested in? Are they kind of a physicist who've spent their life studying a particular thing? So they're definitely going to add that particular angle to that. So I think so because of that, just really do think about kind of your personal statement. Make sure that whatever you've talked about in your personal statement, you are okay to expand on that and answer any questions related to that. So to give you a bit more kind of personal perspective, I was applying for biochemistry at Hilders. Now a big component of my interview was just about subject knowledge. And it's really about trying to understand whether it wasn't a direct question or direct questions. It's really about trying to understand how I answered particular questions. And I would say there were quite advanced questions as well. So it wasn't about, sort of what happens in diabetes, for example, but sort of, maybe a comparison between, a person who has diabetes and then a person who has a different kind of disease, and how that would then influence perhaps the different choices that a doctor might need to make. This is just for you to understand that there's not going to be an easy kind of question out there. However, if you have the basics of the subject, you would be able to understand. And it's all about what your thought process is that they're trying to assess. Then, as I said, the second component of my interview was a lot about sort of what I'd written in my personal statement. So I'd mentioned, I'd done dramatics, and I was kind of also interested in, I did a science project as well. So that really formed the second part of my interview. And what they really wanted to see was how I could contribute to that college. So St. Hilda's does have a very active dramatic society. So they wanted to see whether and how I could fit in there and contribute to the college. It also had a very strong, or still has a very strong kind of research environment, and it's influenced quite richly by that. So that discussion, I think, really also made it. And then the third thing was, as I said, it really depends on the person who's interviewing you. So my tutor at that time was someone who is an expert in metabolism. So, which is why, a lot of questions that I got asked did have that central sort of metabolism theme around that as well. So I would just also encourage you, if you do find out who your interviewer is, to try and see what their interests are. And also perhaps, what this is obviously not very easy to find, but maybe, a particular college has a certain interest that they center around a course. And if you kind of get to that sort of nugget, I think in an interview, you can really sort of piece that together and add those insights in there that can help you.
Yeah, and I think just to add in, it's not just depending on your A-level specific courses. So for example, if you're applying to something like law, they might have a question which is to do with what your aptitude towards law is. So for example, one of the questions would be, if the punishment for parking on a double yellow line were death, and therefore nobody did it, would that be a just and effective law? Right? So they want you to then break down the whole statement. What is just? What is effective? What are the different issues that we have to take into account? How might a just law be? What are the issues about proportionate punishments for the specific crime, right? So there's a lot more to it than just the specific of the question. So it's how you discuss it, how you approach it, that you go on. So you have to give it some thought even before interview, prepare for it, talk to people who've done the interview before, because that will get you a sense of it. And as Meg said, I think I've had people before where they knew what the tutor did research on, and they inevitably ask you the same questions. They'll ask you, give you a picture of a thing, and they'll ask you, where do you think this is? And if you know what the tutor did research on, you know what they're asking for. And so you can't just blurt out, oh yes, this looks like this compartment complex in Russia during this century or whatever that is. But it's you have to work. So see, I can see a park, I can see people playing, or what that sort of a thing is. So I think that helps when you know what the tutor does or like what other people before have done in